HBO Max just dropped a new movie today on January 14th on a Thursday. I kind of wish more services had a more consistent release date like Disney Plus. Disney Plus, I know, Friday, everything's up. All their new content Friday. And I'm sure it's hard to do that with services like Netflix, which have extreme levels of content all the time coming out. So that's different. But services like this that don't have really anything coming out, something's coming out Fridays, something's coming out Thursdays, something's coming out random days of the week, just is irritating. And it would be nice if we had a consistent release date. Unless it's some special thing like, hey, this is a remake of a movie, and if I don't, we're going to drop it on the anniversary of that movie, or something like some weird thing like that. Or a holiday, whatever. But just, it's confusing. Anyways, Lockdown is a film about a couple that is under quarantine lockdown. This film was actually made during the quarantine. And it's got Anne Hathaway, Ben Kingsley, Ben Stiller, and a bunch of other really talented people involved. Most of them glorified cameos within this movie. And it's kind of an interesting movie. We got our couple here who they're stuck living with each other during the quarantine, and they're married and they fallen out of love. One of them has become extremely depressed and sick of life and trying to find out what the meaning of life is, and is very frustrated with a lot of things going on within his own life. And he is trying to deal with that. And so that kind of leads to our third act, which kind of becomes, I guess this is a minor spoiler, but I don't think it'll ruin things. But if you don't want to hear that, skip ahead a couple minutes. It becomes a heist movie. And that part of the movie was probably the best part of the movie. It was the most engaging part of the movie. It's because most of this movie is the Anne Hathaway and our other lead. I'm forgetting the actor. Well, I'm not forgetting his name, but he has a very difficult name to pronounce, so I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce it and screw it up. But they're kind of in this movie, and a lot of them is watching them be depressed through COVID, which a lot of the events within this film, our characters are very bitter and kind of angry at each other because they're just not feeling it towards each other. And Anne Hathaway's character in particular, she is incredibly unlikable. Now, the acting here is pretty good from everybody, but it's what Anne Hathaway is given. Her lines of dialogue, the kind of direction of her snooty attitude within this movie, it makes her unlikable and not engaging to watch, and you don't like her through the majority of this movie. And you follow her and him throughout the entire film. So if you don't like these leads, you ain't gonna like this movie. It very much depends on how much you like these characters. And I just don't. And a lot of that has to do to the fact that it's very they're just kind of, you can tell that they're very bitter, frustrated people throughout this movie. And unlike our other lead, who's trying to sort out what is making him unhappy, what he needs to do, and sure, that leads to some things that aren't necessarily great within the third act, which I won't be spoiling, but still. And it also is a confusing thing, because towards the end, they're all kind of doing things that are actual legit crimes, and you're kind of made to root for them a little bit, but it's kind of like, with your kind of issues and problems you got going on, I don't know if I should root for you doing this, because this is still an unhealthy way of handling your issues that you have going on. And so that's not a good sign either. That's another thing within this movie that's kind of in this like tangled web of stuff going on. It's kind of confusing, it's kind of awkward, but it's still like, yeah, I do like where this film is going in a lot of areas. But I think this film was never boring. I was engaged. It had some good performances. Um, but it's just kind of confused on what it's trying to do a little bit. And I think that doesn't work out very well. Also, the COVID jokes. Okay, we've had like a million of those throughout an entire year. Every Facebook post, Instagram post, Twitter post, every news source has made jokes about it. Every single person I've talked to has made jokes about it. Toilet paper, blah, 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 all that. So it's kind of not funny anymore. And so this movie kind of makes all those jokes about the internet being bad and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, yeah, those are things that happened, but they're not funny. And another thing about this movie is I could say maybe this could be worth a one-time watch, and I feel like it is because I feel like there's enough here to appreciate. But then there's the other side of me going, okay, but is it gonna hold up after that one-time watch? This is a kind of a strange movie in that sense because it is set during a global pandemic that maybe people watching this film 30 years from now who don't remember or weren't alive during the events of last year, will they watch this movie and appreciate it or like it? I don't know, and you know, it's different when you're seeing a movie during World War II. World War II is an event that we still talk about constantly, but if an event like this is not something we're probably going to be talking about. Sure, we will be talking about for at least the next 5 or so years, maybe more, but I don't know anything beyond that. I think this was a 4 out of 10, because it did have good performances. It had some interesting angles to explore with characters, but it just didn't know what to do to make all that stuff work. We have an interesting setup, but a strange execution, and I think a lot of that has to do with how quick this movie was made. They probably would have made a better movie had this movie not been so quickly made, but it had to be made in this time period because it's set during COVID and it has a lot to do with that. So it's kind of like, yeah, that's a cool idea, but just, I don't know. I really enjoy and I can't say I didn't like this film. I didn't enjoy it. I really was engaged throughout the entire film, but it's just kind of strange in what it tries to do. And I think overall, 4 out of 10.